authorized by the Code of Virginia per JFAC's electronic meeting policy. We do not have a quorum this evening, and so we have JFAC members here participating in person and also virtually through electronic means. But because we do not have a quorum of physical participants, physical JFAC members, and we aren't really sure, I'm not reading from the script anymore, I'm going ad lib here. We aren't really sure what the rules are, so what we're going to do is allow our virtual members to listen in on our discussion, but without participation. If you are a guest, you can still get a comment during public comment period, and I will go back to that.
And that is based on advice we just got from Brad.
Right. That is based on advice that we just got from our county board staff. At this time, I'd like to orient everyone to our hybrid environment and cover a few specifics about how tonight's meeting will be run. Members of the public may attend the meeting here in person or electronically by using the Microsoft Teams link provided on the JFAC website. Additionally, there is a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. For commissioners who are joining virtually, if anyone loses internet connectivity during today's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. Please keep your phones and devices muted until you are called upon. Turn off any other sound devices around you to minimize interference. For virtual attendees using Microsoft Teams, please turn off your video feed. I will address when it is appropriate to turn it on in a moment. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat should only be used for participants who need the technical assistance and for members of the public to request during the public comment period. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public comment periods. Additional notes for JFAC members. If commissioners participating virtually wish to be recognized to speak on an item during the course of the meeting, please turn on your video feed and raise the virtual hand in Teams. I monitor the video feeds that are on as an indicator of who would like to speak, although we're not doing that this evening based on advice from our staff liaison. Additional notes for members of the public who would like to provide feedback and public comment. We will hold public comment at the beginning and end of the meeting. Those requesting to speak may do so only one comment period and will be allotted up to 3 minutes to speak on tonight's agenda items. When virtual attendees are called upon to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that is located on your meeting command bar. The moderator does not have the ability to unmute you. You will be muted when your time has completed. Lastly, this is a public forum. Today's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. So welcome, my name is Stacy Snyder. This is my first in-person meeting as JFAC chair. We have a new vice chair, which is Wells Harrell. And we have our former chair, Kathleen McSweeney, here as a special guest to discuss the public-private partnership report research that we did last year that we were hoping to wrap up, but because we do not have a quorum of physical members, there are 8 JFAC members, so we need 5 commissioners here in person for us to conduct business. So we cannot vote on either of our agenda items this evening.
And one update for members attending virtually, because there is no quorum, members attending virtually can participate.
They can.
They cannot.
Oh, they cannot. Okay.
Cannot.
You cannot participate. Sorry, Janet and Ben. Please come next time. Okay, so the first thing on the agenda, we're a little bit behind, public comment. We do have a member of the public here that would like to make a comment.
Thank you. So I'm Mariah Myers. I've spoken with Kathleen a couple of times and Stacy once or twice. Thank you. I'm in the Boston, Virginia Square Civic area. Hello, Steve. So I just want to preface my comments by, thanking you for your service. It's great to do this mission work. And so you're probably going to hear some criticisms from me. You will hear some criticisms from me tonight, but it's not, for any one of you, or certainly not the past chairs. But I just wanted to come tonight and share a few thoughts about what I've seen as the history of JFAC over the last, since its inception. And also give you some things perhaps to think about and a little bit of homework. And I also have some questions. In the past, a lot of people in my neighborhood used to attend these meetings. We're very engaged, and now I'm the only one here tonight. I haven't been for a long time. And I think that's because there's been a great sense of disappointment with what has come out of JFAC, or perhaps maybe not has some of what has come out of JFAC, but really it's more about how the elected and especially the county board and some staff have dealt with JFAC recommendations. So, I feel like they've ignored a number of the recommendations, or they've agreed with the recommendations at one time and then completely reversed course at other times. And I often sense in some of your own discussions from when I've listened into JFAC meetings that there's a strong sense that somehow the commission feels disempowered, or certainly I can see a difference, I guess, from when it was initiated till now. There was a certain level of, enthusiasm and interest, and it's really dropped off, and maybe that's normal. But I guess my concern is that I've seen like hundreds of hours of work of JFAC members over the years, and really, if you add the community engagement over the years, it's been thousands of hours of work. And honestly, it's like a lot of it has just ended up in the garbage can. I would say my observation is that most of it has. And of course, there are many things that are probably happening that are, not so obvious or that I haven't followed, but that's my general sense, especially what happened in the early years. And I would say if you want to do a little homework, I would say listen to the June 17th, 2017 working session it was a joint working session with the board and APS and JFAC, and contrast that with what the board did on May 14th, 2022 at the board meeting, which is basically when they made the decision to put ARC buses at the Quincy site, which was an absolute reversal. Steve, you would remember this, of what JFAC recommended. Anyway, spend a little time on the weekend, just go look at those two videos. A couple other things for some of my observations is that, and this is something that I think a number of my neighbors feel, that there has just been a power imbalance with APS versus the county, in particular DES, in terms of the level, I guess, of interest and attention that the county gets over potential APS uses. And for instance, on the Quincy site, I think there was a lot of interest among the neighborhood for for APS involvement. I'm not talking about the white fleet, but it has been unsuccessful. And we've actually recently heard that from a school board member that basically APS is off the table for the Quincy site. And I guess one of my questions is that really the case? And that was the information we got was that it was because of cost reasons that they're not considering the Quincy site, which would make sense to have APS more involved with that site, given that it would be bordered by both WNL and Science Focus School. Another new item, if you'll just indulge me for an extra minute, is the Carlin Springs site, which big news yesterday, right, with the HC. Well, Steve, you remember this from years ago. That's all it was. It was discussion about this long list of needs, and then balancing those two main sites, Quincy and Carlin Springs. So my question to all of you, and I hope you're thinking about this, is now what? I'm not disputing that there's like an important need that is being met at that site now, but that was never on the long list of things that were considered and that we all in the community suffered through, having all these sort of what fits discussions, and then there were the final recommendations. And again, this is like ended up in the garbage can. And now I guess the question is, what happens to the needs? If anything, since that time, the needs are likely expanding, particularly with Plan Langston Boulevard, Missing Middle. I'm not saying I'm not here even to talk about Missing Middle. I honestly don't care. DES has presented bigger problems to me than Missing Middle ever will. But basically, I think that's something, if I were you, I would really investigate, what are the implications for Carlin Springs? I mean, it's a done deal now, but does it mean that the needs have changed? Does it mean they've gotten shorter? Does it mean there's new acquisition of new sites? I mean, I recognize that there was the Green Valley site purchased for the art facility, but, you know, contrasting with the additional needs that we expect with the new density, I don't know, I think you got a problem in your hand. You and the staff and the electeds. Almost done here. So the other question is around, one comment that a number of my neighbors and I would always make at the JFAC meetings was that we have no representation on this committee. We tried, a number of people applied to be on JFAC, and they had a experience, you know, a range of different experiences that would have qualified them, I think, to have been JFAC members, and they were explicitly denied. I personally did not apply because my father was dying at the time of the application, but I know like there were a handful of people who were well qualified and denied. So I think that just raises the issue of a voice for our community. And I work in international development, and probably the last thing you would do is deny the people who are perhaps the most affected an amount of voice, whether it's on this committee or not. I will say that any type of voice that we've had has been either by inviting a commission member to a civic association meeting or attending public giving public comment. And in the first year we were able to, as a civic association, make a presentation at JFAC. So if y'all think that's good practice, I don't know that you do. I'd be surprised, actually. I don't think, it certainly doesn't follow the rhetoric. So the practice that we have experienced does not at all follow the rhetoric that I hear from the people down hall and others in the county. So just want to put that out there. You can go back to the minutes and you can see that, you know, this is something we usually, if we remembered, we'd always bring it up, that we have no voice. And my almost last comment is, I mean, I've actually thought about writing case studies about this. And finally, since we have some folks here from DES, the last thing I think that would be great if you could put on your agendas with these facilities is around the issue of buffering and transitions for affected neighborhoods. Because it is wholly inadequate and not happening. I'll give my own experience within my neighborhood. They put art buses in an area fully surrounded by residential. I'm almost done. For what is termed a temporary, but yet it's renewable period, right? And they put in hello, George. They put in a 6 or 7 foot fence with a blanket on it to provide screening. That's it, right? So they say that by zoning, they're not required to do it by code. Personally, I think it's bad practice, right? So everybody's pleasant, polite, et cetera, hello. But I think it's bad practice. And I think that in particular, this site, and we were anticipating Carn Springs site too, would have this continuation of temporary uses and ignoring and inattention. So I think for me, because again, with all the development, I think that you guys are in a great place to be recommending buffering and transition and timetables too, right? It's been 7 years since we've been living with this cloud of uncertainty with the Quincy site. I have no more information today as compared to 7 years ago. And we're living with terrible conditions. And if you don't believe me, welcome you to come to our neighborhood and, you know, go to any of my neighbors' yards and just at 4 o'clock in the morning, enjoy the noise, the idling, the pollution from the buses. So with that, thank you very much for your attention. Again, not intended to criticize any of you individually, but I think these are important things for you to know. I'm happy to answer any questions too if you want. Thanks for the extra time.
Does anyone want to respond? Do we respond to public comment?
We generally don't unless you want to. I think maybe addressing the, you know, how people get onto the JFAC. Because we have not received any applications that we haven't followed up with.
Yeah, I mean, that, at least that you know, I've only been chair for
Yeah.
3 weeks, so.
But I can say, yeah.
Yeah, I've had one application, seen one application, and as far as I know, it's moving through. And, you know, I think there were different processes. And, you know, I will say as, you know, and I think you and Kathleen and I spoke,
Yeah.
you know, several months ago, and I will continue to say what, you know, I think really a broad and long-range planning would be very helpful in situations, you know, and I responded to Steve about the, I sent an email about the Carlin Springs site, and I said, you know, like it really underscores this need for broad and
Yes.
long-range planning. Like if I feel like you're, you know, if there was a long-range plan and vision for what would happen to those buses, you know, for the, you know, for the trade center site and where the buses would eventually go, and you're like, okay, we can live with this for, you know, X number of years. You know, I think that there, to me, every day I see new examples of the need for broad and long range planning. And that is what our focus wants to, you know, that is where I want to put our focus in JFAC. And sometimes we'll look at smaller, you know, at smaller questions like the public-private partnerships, or, you know, kind of more specific things, which kind of will help us lead to a better, you know, kind of broader, long-range collaborative planning. But I think if we, you know, kind of, it does, I think that would be helpful in that, you know, I mean, we're going to talk, we can't vote on our updated charter tonight, but I mean, that is the direction that I hoped that the updated recommendation, it's not radically changed from the original charter, but it does sort of give it a little bit more focus to, you know, to direct, you know, and make recommendations that lead to better collaborative long-range planning. And that's really all we can do as a citizen commission. I mean, we can't make decisions. We can't, you know, really, that's right. Kathleen knows.
Thank you. I was just going to suggest, since we do have Mr. May actually on, and there were some very specific things that were mentioned or asked, maybe we'll give him a chance to address any of the comments.
We could. Steve, do you want to make your comment first, or do you want?
Perhaps it would be better to give Mr. May
Okay.
the opportunity if
Okay.
he chooses, and then I'll.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. May, would you like to respond to any of the public comment, or?
No, I'm not really in a position to offer responses to Ms. Myers or the other public comments. The events that are going on this week were all determined by negotiations with the county manager with his counterpart at Virginia Hospital. And beyond that, I don't have anything to add at this time.
Okay, thank you.
So I would like to respond briefly. I would like to express my personal disappointment with the manner in which the apparent deal was conducted, announced. There appears to have been no community involvement whatsoever. And when I say community, I mean the adjoining physical communities.
Which one are you talking about?
I'm talking about the Carlin Springs.
Okay.
Which Mr. May was also
Yeah.
alluding to. But even more disappointingly, JFAC was not in the loop at all, even though JFAC had been heavily involved, as pointed out in discussions about the site planning for both Quincy and Carlin Springs. And I believe that we were led to believe that we would continue to be involved in site planning. So I think it's actually a fabulous overall idea. There's a huge need. So I don't think for the mental health facilities. So I don't think that's in question. And in fact, I think the community actually is broadly supportive of the facility. However, the complete lack of transparency, this is hiding the ball. think unnecessarily. I'm not sure why the county felt that they had to hide the ball on the discussions that were taking place, but they were kept highly secret. JFAC was not involved, the communities were not involved. And so it violated the no surprises concept that we've kind of advocated for. I know that your community was taken by surprise with the art buses. And this is a big surprise in terms of it's being kind of sprung as a done deal for the local communities around the Carlin Springs site. So I think it's very disappointing, but most concretely, had JFAC been involved, I think we would have advocated for compatible co-location concepts for the facility that I think actually it's well recognized that nature is very important for mental health. And so to actually explicitly discuss the possible co-location of, for example, DPR activities on this site, and similarly to it, have at least given APS, I'm going to guess that APS wasn't given any opportunity to potentially advocate for co-location. There is a big issue with schools, but APS has other space needs in addition to actual schools themselves. So I just want to say I'm very disappointed, and I do feel that JFAC was minimized and cut out of the loop, and I think it was detrimental. I think we could have added some value. We could have at least put on the table, right, that we consider some co-location scenarios here. So I don't want to go on at great length, but I think it was a lost opportunity. I'm hoping that we will still have some opportunity, but it's kind of like the horses out of the barn.
Yeah, I mean, there will be I got a phone call from our county board liaison a few minutes before the press release came out, telling me that it was coming out. So that was how informed I was about it. But it did say in the press release that that there will be a public review process, and I told Stephen in email that we'll probably need a liaison for that from JFAC, because Kevin was our,
Like a use permit.
like the public facilities, it says it will go through
Did they say?
PFRC.
PFRC.
Yeah, it'll go through Public Facilities Review Committee.
Right, and so hopefully I will request that JFAC has a member on that committee, and we'll need a volunteer. So, but no commitments needed at this point, because maybe that's sufficient business.
Stacey, if I could just add one more thing, I strongly support what you said about the long range planning. This is another example of need for.
I mean, when the community, I think when there is a long range plan, you bring the community along with you in a way. I mean, I understand that there are some, you're doing like land acquisition deals, that there has to be some privacy and some, secrecy to a degree about. But I think articulating to the community that we need spaces for mental health facilities, that would be helpful. And I think that making a decision, Arlington County is too small, too land constrained to make decisions in a silo. Like, we need to be, this is the whole role of JFAC. We need to be thinking about co-location. We need to be thinking about, what is the best use for this site, both short-term and long-term. If we use this site now, what does that mean for the other site that is left open? Like and what are the other needs that we're going to need? I just feel like that it is so critical, and you hear it. I hear it. In my neighborhood, I bring this up every time, but my neighborhood listserv that is just totally against missing middle. I feel like I just want to chime in and say, like, we could just get the county to, like demonstrate this long range plan, like that they are going, that they have a plan to address transportation, they have a plan to address parking, like that maybe it would be that they could build some goodwill with the community and try to use that in a positive way. So anyway,
One response as well. To the extent you mentioned the diesel fumes and the sound and the emissions as a nuisance, on Monday, the C2E2 Commission, Climate Change Environmental Commission, they had an agenda item on the ART bus, zero emissions bus, like pilot demonstration study. I know that this doesn't solve the problem of where the buses are, but if they are going to remain there, if there is conversion to electric, that may help address some of the diesel fumes, sound nuisances. So I just invite you to, if you wanted to take a look at that, it's up on the website. And that may be another avenue to pursue to try to address wherever these end up permanently. But in the next 7 years or whatever, what happens? So just wanted to mention that.
okay, so we've had public comment. Do we have any liaison updates? Just said, the one that we're going, the one that we see coming up, which is hopefully a public facility review committee for the PFRC for the Carlton Springs site, which I will request. But Kathleen, do you want to talk to us about the report?
Sure, our report.
Our report.
I don't know, Brenda, it's okay to put that up now?
Oh, sorry, it was on the.
Sure. Before we go on, do we want to go around and just do intro? I don't know who you are.
Yeah, I'm Diana Preston. I'm the person I believe you're speaking about. who
Okay.
submitted the application.
Okay, so
So
you're
interested.
just visiting. Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you. Stacy Swells. Claire, it's Kathleen. She's our former member and former chair, TVM. Okay,
This one?
Yes, it's that one.
Okay, and I will share that virtually.
Great. One of the things we noted is that the track changes is not necessarily showing up here. So I'm just going to point out where those changes are. In terms of the introduction, the first 3 paragraphs, there were only very minor, like typographical or, missing word changes like of and the. So I don't think it's material. So we could go to the next item. And the next item would be the executive summary. The next heading, I should say. So the executive summary, here, let me take this off. Okay, the executive summary is a new section. It was in the report, at least the heading was in the report the last time we talked about this, but we actually wanted to have a conversation before we were able to summarize. So this piece of the report is new. Thank you, Steve, because, oh no. Yeah, Steve. There were elements also where you had suggested some additions. And so I put those in the executive summary. It was a while ago, so you may not remember, but so this whole area is new. I don't know, we should stop at every section and talk about any questions people have, or maybe some changes. I will share that any typos will get corrected before we would send it out.
The document ends kind of in a half of like the minutes that started and didn't go anywhere. So I don't know if there's a section.
You mean in the executive summary section?
Yeah, if you go to the bottom of where it is, it says for these reasons.
the JFAC.
So I just didn't know if there was a whole portion that didn't get pasted there
It's not where mine ends.
or.
Yeah. Okay.
But if we're gonna.
Oh, no, I see what you're saying. Okay. Oh, I don't know what happened there. Okay, I think the idea was that for this reason, the JFAC is recommending that there were some follow-on activities that the JFAC had indicated. We followed up with a couple of them, but there are some that we could, or that you could, if you decided to take those actions. And that'll actually be in a following, okay, I'll finish this sentence, but that's what it's referring
So
to.
it would be something like the JFAC recommends the follow-up items.
In Appendix D, I think it was. Yeah, exactly. Okay, sorry about that. The background, actually, very little has changed. Again, just some corrections for the first couple sentences or paragraphs rather. And so if you go past the sample preliminary process, I'm sorry, I don't see page numbers on mine. Page 3. And then go to,
Why can't we pull up what was emailed? Because the document that, I mean, that's how I have it. The track changes document, it was emailed.
so I can send it to you.
I pulled up what was on the website.
Yeah, no, he,
Yeah.
no, he has
Oh,
what's
it's
on the
just the
website.
email.
Yeah, because he just has what's on the website because that's what
But
Matt
couldn't
posted.
someone email and forward the email?
Yeah, I'll do it.
I do two things at once.
That's fine, we can keep going.
Is it possible for you to share an email though?
I don't
It
have
was just
an
an
email that's been open and I have to go
Okay.
through.
Okay.
All right.
Then maybe,
It'll
Let's just keep
be
going.
clumsy.
Could you plug my computer in to the thing?
I'm on the computer
Okay.
of this.
Okay,
I mean, if somebody can join
that's fine.
virtually from here, you can.
It's okay. It's all right.
oh, I see.
So in my draft, changes seem fairly ministerial until you get to Appendix D.
Yeah, that's
maybe
true.
We can just jump to that.
Okay, that seems like a good idea, Wells. Unless anybody wanted to, if there were comments on any sections, perhaps we could take them. I'm at examples of public-private partnerships. and the
Comment on
PPA.
appendix C,
Okay,
not about your changes, but about some proposed changes.
could I make one comment before we do that, about Appendix B, listing of resources used in the research? It's just a note. I had a spreadsheet where I was keeping all of my research. I cut and pasted it into this, which then meant it was not editable. So I will be replacing it rather than snipping it. I'll do it differently so that it's actually editable in this document. Okay, let's go to the Appendix C then. Appendix C is partnership opportunities and other ideas that may not fall under the PPEA guidelines, but could still be pursued.
So I had a few just thoughts upon further reflection of the original language. I wondered if we could add a reference to potential swing space options under the first bullet. And I'm just sensitive about this with some of the incidents that happened at one of our elementary schools being shut down for several days of just like, could we do swing space that maybe isn't an entire separate building, but a set of, classrooms like this, or just like, or partner with the county just to try to be a little creative. Like, hey, everyone, instead of switching to virtual, let's have the teachers and the kids show up in this leased office building or this whatever. So I just wondered if some sort of reference to swing space is a way that's not grand and permanent and gonna take over for 8 months while they rebuild, but is a little bit more nuanced and can deal with, these situations.
There's an HVAC.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
just, the roof,
Yeah.
has some problem. The other thing, I just wondered about the suggested co-location opportunities in the second bullet point. The water treatment plant could have housing or classroom space co-located. I think that might feel like a stretch. I wonder if we could instead say like dog park or something that maybe it just strikes me that classrooms and housing and water treatment may not be the best, fit.
Okay.
And then the third bullet, a little concerned about that. APS has been investing in kitchen expansion at multiple schools. So they are moving away from the idea of outsourcing food preparation. So this would just kind of like run contrary to so much of the capital investment. So I don't think that's useful. After school activities, they already outsource Baruti camps. And then transportation, not sure exactly what's meant here, but they use charter buses for field trips. And so they're sort of either already doing some of this. I'm just not sure how much value this bullet is. Those were my suggested edits on this page.
Kathleen, are you getting that on your phone or do you want me to?
I was gonna go back and listen to.
Okay, all right,
Well,
well,
I can, I don't have paper.
Yeah.
But if you want to take notes, that's great.
Okay.
Yep, I think that those are all good, updates. And a lot of these came, way before, several months ago.
Yeah, fresh eye and.
No, that's
look
good.
at it.
So then, Appendix D, were there other comments on C? Appendix D are the recommendations for follow-up mentioned at the prior meetings. Actually, really, it's the prior meeting that we had for additional interviews or research that were suggested. So I would just mention, so some of this is new, specifically that we did reach out to Julian Gonsalves, who's the Assistant City Manager for Public-Private Partnerships for Alexandria. He very interestingly responded that there is a joint solar project that is actually being led by Alexandria Public Schools, where the city is providing subject matter expertise. So it is, I think, one of the first public-private partnership projects in Alexandria where schools and the city are actually collaborating. And so what he said was he would like to defer speaking with the JFAC until maybe late March, when he'll have more information on the success or maybe some lessons learned about that collaboration. And so the suggestion is that the JFAC will reach out to Mr. Gonsalves at the end of March.
thank you for making that contact. I think to me, the research that we did on this public-private partnership is interesting. There's a lot of it that's interesting and there's a lot of different possibilities, but that it became this kind of means of connecting like the county and APS projects, or, kind of a solar technology expertise with Alexandria Public Schools. I think that there's a lot of that making that connection, collaboration, which I think is really interesting, that role that he played, that sort of pulled projects together.
It's also interesting that Alexandria saw such promise in public-private partnerships that they created a position to actually oversee it.
Right.
So in some ways, it's a little bit of chicken and the egg, right?
Right.
You can take the action to activate, I guess, and identify the different projects that could become public-private partnerships in your jurisdiction, your county, your city.
Right.
Or you could create an office that then makes it happen.
Right.
So, I think maybe there's a lesson in that for us.
Yeah. Yeah, there are for us or for others.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
For us being Arlington.
Yeah.
That's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
I had a possible suggested freestanding follow-up. This is coming out of some discussions I heard about, again, electric vehicle, electric bus, school bus, or bus charging infrastructure. Apparently, jurisdictions do run into challenges with trying to deal with all of the components separately versus tapping into kind of a private partnership where they already have the relationships with a particular bus manufacturer that requires a particular charging station, and that requires this particular software, or, and so this may be another opportunity that it's due to the sort of the novelty of the industry being, it's very dispersed, it's not concentrated, it's not already, oh, all the standards are figured out. That kind of situation may be another situation that would be useful to leverage a private company who has done all that groundwork. So I think it's a little bit of a different now, whether we want to put it in here or just mention it elsewhere, but it's something that I'm becoming aware of with charging infrastructure.
I think it's a great suggestion because remember, PPEA, even though it says education in the title, it can be transportation, it can be parks, it can be, any sort of infrastructure, energy, technology. So yeah, I may have said technology twice, but you get the idea. So I think that's a great thing. I would ask Claire, is it possible for you to write something up and send it? Only because I think you're more well versed in this than I am.
Yeah, sure.
So, right, maybe energy infrastructure as kind of a parent topic to be elaborated a little bit. So it could include the actual solar generation, but also charging. And there may be some other, even battery backup, for example.
Batteries and buses.
So I think that'd be a great suggestion.
It's great. And then I wasn't sure, we had Eric had suggested, some questions to ask of APS, really to provide a little bit more of a baseline for some of the recent projects that had some difficulty to do a little bit more of analysis. Is this something that PPEA, that a public-private partnership could actually have helped with or not? Some of that is a little bit of, we'd have to do a little bit of guessing, educated guessing in that case. But like I'm just going to pick on a project, the lack of accessibility in a school and inside a school, and also with the playground of a school, in a public-private partnership, if that had been in the specs, if that had actually been in the requirements, the private partnership would have been, on the hook to make those changes. And so, I think they're always a little more complicated than that, but it might be interesting to actually go ahead and still do this series of questions with Renee Harver or her staff, whomever she, thinks that the JFAC might talk to. And you don't, and maybe it's not even, you don't have to talk to them. Maybe it's just have them, fill out this questionnaire. Because I thought they were good questions.
I think that's a good way of kind of wrapping that up because, I think when we had the last time we had the discussion about this, there were so many ideas about how to move forward. And it was like we could continue to do this for a year, but I like the way that you still listed these questions because I think they're very relevant. And it would be interesting to find out what the answers are. But it's also, but are we going to move on to other questions? I will say that Wells and I are meeting with our county board and school board liaison tomorrow morning. So we really haven't finalized what our work plan will be for the year. But I mean, we have some ideas, but I don't want to say what they are without having spoken to both our kids. The last time we tried to set up a meeting, David couldn't make it and Wells couldn't make it. So it was just Libby and I, and I don't feel like I can, just add. But anyway, we will have more information at our February meeting about what our work plan is going to be for the coming year. I'm hopeful that we will be working on, toward some long-range planning, whether it's, either more focused, smaller pieces or bigger even. So we'll keep going, but I really do like, to get us off track, but I really do like the way that you incorporated those questions still in there.
And I was going to offer, first of all, Ben Malakoff had actually offered to also have a conversation, or be part of a conversation with Julian Gonzalez from Alexandria. So I don't know if this group would want him, Julian, to come and speak to the JFAC, if that's a possibility.
Right.
Or if you would want Ben, and I would also offer, I would be happy to continue to follow up on some of these items if you wanted to appoint, like a subgroup or something.
Right.
And work with Ben to have that conversation, say offline, and bring that information to the JFAC. I guess it all depends on what their work plan looks like.
Yeah, well, let's see. Right now, we have a couple things lined up for February. It looks like we're gonna try to get a quorum to vote on this again and our charter again. I think we're also gonna get an update on projections. And maybe something on the budget.
Or the county's demographic information.
Right, county's demographic information and maybe something on the budget too. But anyway, we have a couple things lined up for February, but beyond that, we have not made any. But we hope to do that tomorrow. Or get a little bit closer. So, does anybody have any other comments on the public-private partnership report? Okay. All right, so we will move on now to too far behind. Recommendations on updates to the JFAC charter. So this is a cleaned up version draft that has gone through quite a few cleaned up versions, drafts and cleaned up versions. We can potentially show what the original charter looked like, if that is something that you guys want to look at. I don't know if our members here have had a chance to look at the updated charter. And if you have any questions or thoughts.
I just call it one of the biggest changes, and this is trying to kind of reorient us toward pushing the county and APS to be more proactive than reactive. So if you wouldn't mind just scrolling down to the bottom half of the first page.
Of this.
Yes, yeah, just scroll down to the bottom half. That's the old chart.
Yeah.
So you notice that, so those first 2 points are just review. So we are, kind of passively taking in what the county and APS give us and then getting feedback. With the new charter, we can kind of click over to that. New proposed charter, the very first element of our chart, if you can scroll up just a little bit to get to that first paragraph, sorry, is that focus on long-range planning, kind of having that be our lodestar that guides the rest of our work.
And then we rearranged some of the, we put the capital improvement plan, as number 2. I think in the original charter, it was down at number 3 or 4. Anyway, maybe it was at 2. Anyway, review CIPs. Okay, yeah, it was a 2. For some reason it was in another draft, it got moved down. But I think, that's okay. But anyway, I mean, the CIP work is important work that we do and, and on the alignment between the 2 CIPs, I think is really important. We realized that became very last year. The needs assessment reports, provide updates to, the rest is not that much change. It isn't radically changed, but I think where we did put, we did put more of an emphasis on collaborative long-range planning. Go ahead, Claire.
I can't remember if we referenced the FAC, the APS's facilities committee version, either by expressing like a potential liaison or a potential check-in or a informal partnership. I don't know, but given that we're joined, I just didn't know if there was any appetite for that.
I think we do talk about having liaisons to other,
Yeah, isn't there language further down that touches on who else we're coordinating with? There's PFRC. And
Yeah, there we go.
here's the laundry.
Got
I got charters,
And it's including. Yeah, it is. It's
schools, facilities,
I just
and
wanted to-
capital projects. The advisory council on school facilities, that's fine.
Yeah, I know that, they're coming out with a, facilities framework decision matrix this spring. You're following that?
Yes, and that would be, and we may get that update in March. That's like the needs assessment thing that they've been working on for like the facilities review.
Supposed to help guide how to prioritize.
Right, yes. And that, they've been working on that for,
8 months.
for a long time, and we may get it in March, but we may get it in April.
Yeah, depending on the consultant.
Right. But that we will be involved in.
Okay. I guess we don't need to reference it specifically, but what I am noticing is that there are more frequent investment in these types of decision matrices. They developed one on building electrification retrofits. So it's a decision tool. I don't know if it makes sense to reference any of those things in here, just like the ASAP, right? Just
Right.
like CIP. These decision tools, these matrices, they may end up being a lot more important than we know, because based on the assumptions, that's how you get to allocate resources. It's like, oh, well, plug it into the algorithm and it spits out a mental health facility, Carlin Springs, but what? So it's like, well, then let's talk about the algorithm. So I just wanted to mention that because I'm seeing a trend there towards these decision tools.
Maybe if there's a way that we can reference, we do say review APS and county needs assessment reports. Maybe and just say, and other decision making decisions or
Methodologies.
Planning methods, planning tools.
What's our language earlier on where we talk about the trends and so forth?
based on analysis of the latest trends, forecasts, and service delivery models.
I'm wondering whether it might make sense to say something about methodologies.
Yeah,
Oh,
decision
something-
methodology.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
To me, that seems like a
let's just try to make sure that we can point to that language. somewhere.
Okay, yeah, I'm willing, yeah, let's put, big picture things and,
Yeah.
okay.
And if you guys could scroll down to the third point in there fully. So we covered this before, but one of the big changes from the last version of the charge, or it's the operative version of the charge, is the addition of the needs assessment and the FSAP. And, at least my understanding of the intent of that is to make clear that we don't just want to be a sort of like, rubber stamp at the end of the CIP process. The point is not just to get us involved at the proposed CIP, but well before that, at the stage where they're actually developing their needs assessments so that we can give meaningful inputs then as the CIP is being prepared before it's actually formally proposed.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there has not been an ASAP since 2019 because of COVID, and I think that caused some issues in the last CIP because there wasn't any like real, and that's what the ASAP does is it sets up, at least for APS, it kind of creates the scenario, like here's what we need, here's what we have, here's the competing interests, and we have to weigh all of these. And I will say I was on a chairs meeting last night with the chair of the school board, Reed Goldstein is chair this year, and he and Rosa Cheney, who's the chair of the FAC, was talking about there's new, and I think Robert the ASAP and our APS staff that came to talk to us in December also talked about their new timing for JFAC and FAC to provide input for the ASAP. So we're going to be, at least the FAC, Rosa was explaining, will be invited to provide input over the summer. So there will be the ASAP will be released in June, something like that.
Yes.
And then, but CIP direction won't be made by the staff recommendation, won't be made to the school board until the fall. So the FAC and JFAC will have the summer to provide input and recommendations for CIP direction.
Yeah, and the idea is that it'll have something to react to.
Right.
So that's why, the feedback period is after there's a draft down.
Right.
June.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we need to reference. Right. I mean, I do think that's a great, it's not, I think that's an improvement on the process. I will say that back in 2019, when they did the ASAP, I was chair of the Facilities Advisory Committee at the time. And we made a lot of recommendations on changes to the ASAP that were responded to by staff and, and implemented, and I mean, we worked together. There were a lot of changes and recommendations and that would begin to build a bridge towards greater collaboration with the county is what the idea would kind of begin to speak more of the same languages where they, instead of planning in quadrants, they started planning, they started showing, growth in
The metro station areas.
right, the metro station areas and, the highway and, that Columbia Pike, just sort of different planning areas. So, I mean, I think, but, I do think kind of having this new timing where there's more time and availability to respond and give feedback to, I think. But I don't think we need to reference that.
I was just gonna mention, I think a lot of these changes are good. And number 3, though, I think what it points out when you read it, if you've been involved in this for any time, is that APS does have a process by which, you know, the FSAP, they actually have a process by which you can actually see what the thinking is and what the planning is. The county, on the other hand, does not have a transparent planning process. You know, outside of, you know, what the comprehensive plans might say, right? Or, you know, specific area plans. There is no, you know, CIP planning that is entirely transparent, like it on the school side. And so I think it's interesting because there is a little bit of an imbalance in terms of what the JFAC is going to review, and it's really a function of how each entity operates. I'm not suggesting a change here at all. I'm just suggesting that it shows the imbalance.
I mean, I think I couldn't agree more, and it's something that we've talked about again and again, you know, that, you know, made a recommendation for the county to have a similar planning document for their public facilities to the AFSAP. You know, maybe in that document, a public health facility, you know, mental health facility would have been mentioned. You know, maybe in that document, you know, there would be more planning for, you know, bus park, you know, kind of long range planning, you know, identified for bus parking or, you know, electrification of our buses. And, you know, I know, you know, the trade center.
Exactly.
Like the
Put it
trade
right
center
on
site
the
is sort of put on hold because they're waiting for APS to like make a decision about electric buses. And, you know, it is, you know, that I think that they're, but I think for the purpose of this revised charter, I think we can leave this as it is.
I wasn't suggesting change.
Right, yeah.
It's more an observation.
I mean, I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can.
Well, it's charter. You don't want to be too.
Yeah.
Right, you don't want to, but if there's a way that we can sort of nudge,
I think that should be in your conversations, right? With.
right,
county.
yeah, or nudge the county to potentially. Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that we, you know, nudge the county to potentially have I'm just wondering if there's a way that we could just add a couple words in this sentence and say, you know, receive and review public input on them. And urge planning alignment. But of the reports, encourage planning.
So we have alignments referenced in point 2, but that's for the CIPs themselves and their subject matter. And then under 3, you know, at the end of that first sentence, we've got, you know, provide input on the development of the CIP, which I think would pretty clearly encompass
Right,
weighing in on the process
right,
for developing them, especially the extent to which one seems to be following a more kind of public, open, transparent process than the other with kind of firmer timetables. I guess the question is, how much do we actually want to put prescriptively in there? About what kind of input we expect to provide.
I mean, we do say make recommendations on the respective boards on each report. We just say consider, we could also say consider the alignment again. Consider the alignment of the reports.
You don't have a report.
Yeah. Consider alignment of the planning.
So I guess I wasn't suggesting putting anything else in there. I was, and certainly this is not your only bite at the apple, right? In fact, at their New Year's meeting, the county board actually specifically spoke about commission charges. I don't know if any of you watched that, but they specifically spoke about commission charges, and Ms. Crystal said, well, we actually encourage our commissions to review their charges very regularly. In fact, the JFAC is doing theirs now. So I was quite pleased that, you know, other board members knew that. But it turns out that maybe in the future, you know, again, I just meant, you know, to make an observation, if it turns out in the future that, you know, the pushing, you know, gently isn't happening, or you aren't seeing a result, you know, I would go back to my county board liaison and talk about it.
Yeah.
Just a question about this. We know that we don't have a needs assessment report, meaning a compilation. Are we saying also that the needs assessments are not dispersed in all the different little, you know, departments, and hey, where's that list of whatever? I'm just wondering.
Oh, no, they definitely have lists.
Well, so that's what I'm wondering is like, okay, so you don't have a compilation. Can we start asking for what you do have, even if it's dispersed?
Well, in the paragraph right below this, it says the county and APS will each develop their own capital facilities needs assessments, which are comprehensive reviews of the current facility capacity for county and APS services and projected service demand that will affect facility capacity. County's needs assessment report is the Arlington Capital Facilities Needs Assessment. Have you ever seen one of those?
Is that a real thing?
So if you actually look at, there is a really thick document. It used to be on paper. I actually have one from many years ago. And you can go through department by department. I think it's actually more of a budget book, but in there somewhere were some sort of placeholders. And I don't know if, you know, maybe I should find it and for a future conversation, you guys.
Yeah, maybe it's this paragraph that needs some,
But, well,
you know,
we're talking about providing input on the development of the CIP, so maybe we're just
but,
elaborating slightly on that.
but it's not, you know, I
Because
do think that well, I will at least speak for the AFSAP. I think it is a really, really important tool. And
Sure, yeah.
it really defines what we have, or, you know, what we as what APS has, what they need, you know, it compares. And it, you know, it looks at it both in the short term and in the long term. And it looks at growth, it looks at, you know, and, you know, when we had the APS staff members come and speak to us about the AFSAP in December, I do think that one of the things that's really important too is that they begin to kind of, and it kind of lays out and it puts it in a plan, you know, and
it gets it wrong sometimes.
it did.
The 2019 got it really wrong.
But it was based on the best possible information.
It's not to not,
I had
not to knock the author. But
It was a good
because
try.
of, right, just
Right.
unforeseen that, and
Right.
that I think unfortunately is undercutting some of the appetite for these long range plans. Because we have seen a lot of whipsawing.
But the counter argument would be that at least APS has kind of a chain of logic where they're trying to go through a needs assessment, they're pulling it together into the AFSAP, and the AFSAP is significantly informing the development of the CIP. And I don't think that on the county side, there's really a logic chain like that. And so you've got like silo-based individual components of the county may be saying, well, I need X, Y, and Z. Another component in complete isolation is saying, and I need A, B, and C. And it doesn't appear that there's a mechanism to look across the silos and do kind of a county-wide facility needs assessment.
Yeah.
But Well, we can keep banging our head up against the wall, or maybe we can try to say, can we try to reach down and get some of the planning documents that are in these silos and take a look at them, like, was it the paving quality index, right? In some ways, is that a long-term planning document for paving and prioritization, and how do we, and okay, that's not part of a comprehensive, but you staple it with other things. I'm trying to be a little creative here because we have had this conversation.
Right.
So can I make a suggestion for the charge? And that's actually to, in the kind of second full paragraph under point 3, just remove the second sentence. Because I'm not sure if there is such a thing as the Arlington Capital Facilities Needs Assessments.
Okay.
And I think we can change the sort of subject of the next clause to, these assessments. Well, might even need to change that one too. The aspiration, I don't know.
I also think it's really important that, the county and APS, they have quite a few shared projects, like shared sites, like bring up the Trade Center again. Like that's a site that Arlington County uses and APS uses to park buses. So what happens on that site needs to be planned together. Jointly. And so, that was a recommendation I made for the AFSAT, like to include a section that has joint projects or buildings that have like Thomas Jefferson Middle School that has a community center in it, like these projects that, share HVAC systems or that may need big capital improvement projects or, fields on, at schools that are also part of the county, like those sort of joint parks, joint projects. But in a small county like Arlington, where the sites are limited, where growth is going to happen over the years, as APS grows, if it continues to, even if it levels off now, at some point, even or drops, at some point it will grow again. If world population continues to grow, and not fall. We will need, the APS cannot, this was the argument when we were facing, huge over enrollment numbers, like APS cannot solve this by itself. We need county sites to do it as well. We'll need to share, and not only that too, we share a 10% debt service limit. So, there is so much, there's so much that that collaborative planning needs to happen. And that the capital improvement plan is actually just sort of implement, I think that most of the really important planning and the really important determination of what we need, what APS needs to build and when and why, all of those questions are answered in the AFSAP. And then you figure out how to fit it in the CIP in sort of a financial planning document. That has to also align with the county board's priorities too, the road, pothole repairs and sidewalks and
Stormwater.
Yeah, stormwater and other important, transportation and other county public facilities. So I think that it's important that planning also aligns, and that as JFAC we're also looking at the alignment of that planning, because that I think that planning is sort of the foundation of what makes a good CIP.
I think one thing we can also do, this is something that Stacy and I have talked about, is helping the county and APS understand what the opportunity costs are for a given site for the other. So if there's a site that, APS really has in mind for, say, a new or expanded school facility or some other purpose, it is not only useful for the county to be able to take stock of, well, wait a second, do we have a potential use for that site? What might we be interested in the future? But also, necessary for them to consider what would sort of our own planning look like without that site as part of the menu of options that we might have in the future. I think that's all the more important when we start doing corridor level planning with very limited spaces already, and particularly where there are spaces that are, say, owned by one that may, be kind of really valuable for use by the other. And so kind of helping facilitate those conversations. Yeah, exactly. So, Stacey, to your point, not just like during the CFP process where, someone has already decided what their priorities are, and these are just what they want to spend money on, as a matter of most urgency. But even before then, deciding, among the range of options that may affect the choices that, either APS or the county has based on what the other does and is moving forward on, it's helpful to understand those opportunity costs all around.
Where long-range planning comes in. Even long-range planning for individual sites, I think is important. Anyway. Okay, so let's look at that paragraph in 3 again. And I appreciate bringing that up because I do think that's really important. As I'm sitting here, I think that like the ASAP and having the county have something similar, is really kind of an important part of our charge.
So I also
Or at least encouraging the county to have something similar, continuing to have something similar, an important piece of our charge.
I think that's right. I think it's important in 3 to be both kind of better descriptive and more prescriptive. Descriptive in the sense that like we haven't had an ASAP in a 1-year timetable in several years. We're not even sure if the county document that's referred to there kind of even exists, or if it's more just kind of individual departments survey responses for needs assessments. So we should have some flexibility as to what's APS and the county are due as far as their facilities needs assessments. But then also, include at least, what do you call it, a nudge or something else, some, as part of our charge, a sort of encouragement to both to kind of sync up their processes, put them on more of a cadence and make them more publicly transparent.
Do you, Claire, have any? All right. Let's see where we are on our agenda.
Okay.
All right, well, I guess since we don't have a quorum, then we will continue to work on this charter. And hopefully we'll have a quorum in February. And do we have any other public comment?
Yes, I'd like to make a public comment if I could.
Okay,
Ready?
yes.
Yes, hi, I'm Bill Roos. So at the November 16 JFAC meeting, Commissioner Claire Noakes mentioned that Arlington is going to be facing some constraints due to the capacity limits of the electrical grid. And she suggested that the county and APS and JFAC need to think more deeply about the electrical load capacity of the county. So I know there was some discussion in this meeting about the electrical vehicle charging infrastructure, and that Commissioner Noakes might be doing a report on that. But as far as the overall, issue that Commissioner Noakes referred to, that is the constraints on the capacity limits of our electric grid, is that something? Are we going to hear more about that? Is JFAC going to look into that, or where are we going on that? Thank you.
Is that your statement?
So, yeah, thanks for following up on that. My understanding, and this is somewhat based on conversations that are being held within the Energy Committee that reports to the C2E2 Commission, that there are open questions as we try to decarbonize, especially transportation, but also decarbonize our buildings. Whether Dominion, who has the monopoly power for transmission and distribution, so we're not talking about generation, we're talking about transmission and distribution, you know, they will have to ramp up development, you know, and installation of substations and transformers. And what you end up hearing, and it's an open question, but some people believe that we are going to start running into costs and space issues as you try to, you know, put up a huge building, and do they need a lot of EV charging in the parking garage? And okay, we need a substation. Where are we going to put the substation? Are we going to try to put it in, take away a pocket park in order to build it? Like, so these are some of these longer term questions. And I do think that it is within, you know, it is reasonable to talk, you know, for us to start talking about, because of the space constraints and because of the term of this process. So I don't know that we have anything concrete, but this is part also of out of the box thinking of what is a public facility. And, you know, adequate charging infrastructure, that's not something that anyone would have probably put as a public facility when we started, but it is one now. So thank you for the follow-up.
Okay, great. So you'll be, I mean, I assume you and JFAC will keep looking at this issue and kind of pushing for it to be considered carefully.
Well, we're still developing our work plan for the year. I mean, I do hope that we will, you know, at least consider, I mean, I think, you know, there is so much overlap, and that I will continue to emphasize that our, you know, that our main focus is on long-range planning, collaborative long-range planning. But I do think that, you know, electrical, you know, our electrical grid fits into this collaborative long-range planning, you know, not just public facilities, but also transportation, also, you know, parks, and, you know, how it all fits together. It's not, you know, it's not siloed, you know, it can't be, you know, but I will say that one of the, you know, a couple of ideas have come up. You know, we're still trying to get, you know, feedback from, you know, our board liaisons, but, you know, where, you know, one idea that has come up that we could potentially work on is the alignment of, you know, the county has clean energy goals of 2050, and how does that align with APS? And sort of work on, like, sort of focus on a smaller question in that, like bringing those together. Are there, you know, facility needs that would need to be put in place? Are there, you know, what would, you know, what is the back and forth with, you know, county infrastructure that would need to be, you know, considered as well. So that's sort of, it's, you know, that's an idea. Another idea we had was looking at parking, you know, or, you know, the issue came up with the Heights building. I don't want it to be about a specific building. I don't want to be a, you know, BLPC or PFRC for a specific site. But, you know, at the Heights building, I'll just use that as an example. The county had certain ideas about what their expectations were for parking, and APS had a different idea about what their expectations were for parking. And both were valid, they just weren't aligned. So, you know, I think kind of that is a role that we could play. I mean, there is a possibility too that we could do some bigger picture kind of long range planning, but I'm not sure, you know, how that is.
Well,
Is it fair to, though, mention to Bill, to the extent he would like to see it, for him to contact Libby Garvey and David Pretty, our liaisons. Is that fair?
Sure.
I guess I said it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think
Just
that's
a thought.
fair. I mean, we are an advisory commission to the county boards, and so, and we have staff that, I mean, we can provide some direction, but we really, we really want to be working.
This also triggers me to think back to the decision matrix concept and, an area where possibly we could add value would be in helping to develop kind of a set of parameters or whatever you want to call them that we would recommend be considered, where the grid, the, power infrastructure might be one dimension of that. Forgive me for using the buzz phrase, but resilience. We haven't really talked about resilience, but if you tried to look at facilities from a resilience lens, for example, what if there was a disaster and all of a sudden we needed to house a bunch of people? Are there things that we could do that would make a facility in the event of some, calamity able to accommodate an unexpected influx of people? I'm just using that
The
as an
county
example.
just finished a resiliency plan, and they are making that public.
So there could be a whole set of things that we, in trying to do long range planning and thinking about facilities, that we could recommend that the two sides, the APS
Right.
and the county, factor in.
Yeah.
the Mix.
I mean, I think there's, in my mind, there's two ways of looking at it. Like, there's the really big picture. There's that long range planning where we're really pulling all of that together. We're seeing these threads and we're pulling them together and like, oh, this fits here, this needs to be thought about. Let's, communicate that to the public. You're doing all of these things, you're doing these things, like you just need to sort of push that out and open more, or let's, connect that person with that person. And then that will make this, there's that sort of bigger picture thing, which would be fantastic. And Arlington absolutely needs it. But it will take the majority of the board to want it. So, short of that, we can focus, I think, on the things like the alignment between schools, kind of to take these smaller bites and sort of work towards a bigger picture, try to find these connected threads that we have been doing for the last couple of years, like with these public-private partnership, the schools in sector plans, the missing middle research that we did, which I think is really interesting, which also sort of pointed to, again, these localities doing, looking, visionary thinking, planning for 40, 50 years ahead, or 20, 30 years ahead. So. Okay. So we'll have more information, I hope, after, at our February meeting, and hopefully we'll have a quorum. If you're watching or listening, please come to the meeting. It's really important. Thank you, Kathleen, for coming.
Thank you. It was nice to see everybody again.
Thank you to our public commenters as well.
Yes, thank you to our public commenters. Thank you to Robert, Brad.
Thanks for all the hard work.
Right.